now being recorded.
And as you just heard the notification, this meeting's now being recorded. And so for those of you who really like what you hear and want to share it with others, please let them know that it's been recorded and they'll be able to come back to it. Or if you want to come back and listen to some of the content again, you'll be able to find that available on our website. So good morning. Today, what we're going to be talking about today is winning in the next 90 days. And when we think about the next 90 days, my goodness, it's like how the week started earlier with a lot of fog out there and trying to see through the fog. The dean of the college, actually, who did business in London for quite some time, is the working in the business college over there, talked about you just go through the fog. You just go into the fog. And that's what it feels like a little bit for these next 90 days. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, not sure exactly what's in front of us. But I think the key thing we know is we need to keep moving forward. There's really only one direction to go, and keep going toward what is in front of us. And today we're going to be talking about best operating practices for recovery. So we're excited to have the topic. I think it couldn't be more timely, John Herman. And so we're thrilled to have you on screen here today. Okay. If you would go ahead and forward to, I think you've got slide control. There we go. So for today, I'm going to be your host. I'm Carol Butler, the president of the Gehring Center, and it's delightful to be here in, I would say, the Gehring Center, but obviously we're all in our home offices, and so excited to be here with you today. John Herman, of course, is going to be our presenter, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. And Lisa Jonas, program director for the Gehring Center, is our moderator, and she'll be coming back to the end and helping us with the questions toward the end of this morning. I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors. We have corporate partners that help us do great work at the Gehring Center, and without them, gosh, we couldn't do what we do for the price that we do it. And so we really appreciate their sponsorship, so we can deliver great programming, great institutes, great meetings to you in a way that is affordable and can reach as many people as possible. One of our new corporate partners this year is Brixey & Meyer. They're a regional CPA and business consulting firm focused on driving sustainable growth for their clients. They're often known to be a competitive advantage for their clients, which is a pretty nice way to think about a business. We also have U.S. Bank and the Ascent Private Capital Management Group. They've been good corporate partners with us for a long time. They believe in all about putting people first and dedicating themselves to making the most ethical decisions, doing the right thing, and that's always at the heart of what they do. And then MAI Capital Management had previously Dovich, John Dovich and Company. They're a full-service wealth manager and registered investment advisor that cater to the financial and planning needs of high net worth individuals, families, business owners, and professional athletes. High net worth may mean something a little different today than it did about a month ago, but I think those are some of both the challenges and the opportunities in front of us. Let me draw your attention to the chat box on your lower left. As you have questions throughout the presentation this morning, if you would just go ahead and enter those questions there, we'll collect them and we'll come back to them at the end of the session this morning. So we're going to let John do his presentation and then we'll handle the questions at the end. And Lisa will be pulling those together. So just kind of capture them there. The one request we have is we don't really want to create ongoing chats in the chat box just so we can stay focused on the meeting today. So we appreciate that. So we have a question as you go into this presentation today, I'd like you to be thinking about. To what degree has your operating plan or your strategies for 2020 been impacted or altered by COVID-19? And think about it on a scale of 1 to 10, like 1, no big deal, or 10, most significantly, big deal. And so if you'll just kind of keep that in mind and think about that as you walk through the presentation today, that would be something we'd like you to just kind of have top of mind. And for some, this has been a really challenging time in a sometimes negative way. And for others, this has turned out to be a tremendous opportunity. But rethinking strategies, rethinking some of our key goals, adapt, be agile, adjust, and be ready for that future. So it's an exciting time in many ways, and we're looking forward to hearing what John has to say about guiding us through that. So let me just say a few things about John Herman. He's a trusted advisor and coach to small businesses And as it turns out, he's actually our facilitator for the implementation of the Entrepreneurial Operating System at the Gehring Center as well. So what he's going to go through today, frankly, we've been living through since the end of last year. We started, I guess, late summer, early fall, and there's some particular things you're going to hear today about concepts like gets it, wants it, has capacity that are deeply meaningful to the work we do and have helped us as a small organization make great decisions about what we can do and what we don't have capacity to do. So it's been really a great beacon for us. A little bit more about John, though. He is truly a no-nonsense, get things done, warm-hearted leader. He's got over 20, get things done, John. I heard that. Yeah, is it complete or not? But he's had over 20 years of business building experience, so he's been in the trenches, he's been on the front line, he knows what he's talking about. He's an integrator who is passionate about helping owners of privately held and family businesses to build healthy and thriving companies. He has owned several businesses. He's been in key multiple leadership roles multiple times. He founded Worthy Endeavors, his current firm, in 2016. The mission is bring order to chaos, which couldn't be more perfectly timed than our world today. So really, right time, right place, right message. In 2019, he co-founded Conscious Capitalism, and I'll just say, reference that he is a native Cincinnatian, so he's well versed in our region and what's happening here. And so without further ado, John Herman.
Wow. Let's just wrap it up right there. That's a great intro. Thank you so much, Carol. I'm really humbled by that and humbled to have been able to work with you and your team here over the last year or so. So you mentioned that term integrator. Let me speak to that. That's a label that I've actually figured out, just to give you that one little bit more about myself, is I've been able to work in businesses over the last 25 years, large and small, in our city. What I have found out about myself is I sit in the middle of that space between strategy and execution. I love the idea of being able to work with teams and take strategy and vision and figure out kind of how do we get this done to be able to grow and scale in a healthy way through chaos. And so I'm still waiting. Eventually, when the Avengers scale out and build their team, if we ever get to a point where there's an Avenger for integration, maybe that's when I'll get the call. But that's, as I found out in business, that's my sweet spot, is really helping to bridge the gap between strategy and execution. So this, hey, Mike Tyson, boy, did he really coin this for appropriately for where we are today. He said everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think at some level, all of our small business and mid-sized business leaders, owners we got punched in the mouth over the last 2 months. So one of the things I want to share with you is that I've continued to stay in the space of small business, even though I do coaching the vast majority of my time. I co-own businesses and run businesses right along with many of you. So I own a business called Beyond Exercise in the health and wellness space. And boy, did we get punched in the mouth on March 20th. We're based in the Oakley area, and like many restaurants and other businesses and service providers in Ohio, we were told that we were going to need to close our doors. And so, boy, we had to pivot and work real hard in a very short period of time to try to adjust to what was the new normal. And I'll share a little bit of that as we go through the presentation of what it is look like for us in that business environment in the health and wellness space, to be able to pivot and adjust when we felt like we had a great plan. And many of you, and what we'll talk about today, is that many of you have been working really hard and had worked really hard on putting plans in place for 2020 and the way that we thought 2020 was going to go. And we put strategies and operational plans in place and met measures and all of these things and put people in various roles. And now, we're adjusting to the new normal. And so as we come out now and we start to look at recovery, one of the things that I really want to help us with is maybe we don't throw away all that work. Maybe we don't throw away that entire plan, but we need to readjust and look at how we can utilize the work that we did and the hopes that we have for 2020 and dial those into something that we can start to then focus on as we move into recovery and in a finer period of time, what I would say a 90-day work plan. So here's what we're going to do today. I want to work to really equip your team. So some of you are attending this individually. Maybe you'll share some of this with the content, I hope, with some of the other leaders within your organization. Maybe some of you are attending as teams today. I want this to be really hands-on. I want to equip your team to win during recovery. I want to give you a framework for a 90-day work plan. We mentioned, Carol had mentioned EOS and Traction. I'm going to pull some tools from there, but I'm going to pull some tools from some other places as well, and things that have worked for me and are working for us now in small business, both with clients and with businesses that, again, that I own and operate. I want to give you several execution tools that you can add to your toolbox, and that's the first graphic, not the second, in terms of the kind of execution tools that I want to give you today to walk away from. So here's how to engage today. One, I hope that you have, if you do have a operating plan for this year, or you put something together, you put a strategy together, dust that off, reference it. I'm going to encourage you to, if you might even have that in front of you during this presentation, or if you're watching a recorded version of this later, pull up that operating plan and strategy and reference it and mark it up as we go, or come back to it later. Jot down observations and questions, and you can put those in the chat box as we go, because I'm going to actually cover a lot of content. We're going to cover a lot of ground today with some different elements of this, of how to execute better and how to build this work plan. And so as you see things that you have questions with, we're going to leave about 10 minutes at the end, and I'll try to cover as many of those as I can. So go ahead and enter those in the chat box as we go, or jot down questions for the end. And then I want to encourage you to, if this has been helpful for you, schedule some time with your leadership team to meet afterward and actually put some of this to use in working to create a 90-day work plan. So I mentioned EOS. Carol had mentioned EOS at the outset of this, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and just context for that. A lot of the tools that we'll pull from are from this system, which was really coined by Gino Wickman, who wrote the book Traction, going on probably 10 or 12 years ago. This system is a system that businesses are using to run their businesses by. It's used by over 80,000 businesses worldwide now, and it really focuses on 3 areas: vision and getting really clear around that, creating traction and momentum, and doing it in a healthy way, growing and scaling your business in a healthy way. And that's one of the reasons why personally it really resonates with me. The idea of coming out of chaotic environments, building business, building organizations is chaotic by even when we're in a time like this. There's always a certain amount of chaos in growing and building things. And so one of the things that I'm just really passionate about, and I found that I feel really called to, is to do that as much as we can in a healthy way, to grow things, grow organizations and businesses in a healthy way. And I find that system is a really helpful way to do that. The other thing I wanted to share with you is I came back to what Covey said when he wrote his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he said most leaders would agree that they'd be better off having an average strategy with superb execution than a superb strategy with poor execution. And I just have found this in my own businesses to be true time and time again, that the idea that the execution, the way that we execute a plan, is really what wins the day. It's not necessarily having the most polished, the best strategy. And I was reminded of this just recently watching some of the NFL draft and thinking about, which seems like forever ago now, the last football season with the Bengals. And my guess is when the Bengals would come into game day, they were coming in with a plan, a game plan that was probably on par with whoever was across the field from them. The challenge with the Bengals was the way in which they executed. It was the literal blocking and tackling compared to the team that was across the field from them. And so the team that executes better is the one that generally is going to. So what I want to really help you with today, and with a lot of the content that we're going to cover, is that even in the environment that we're facing, and as we move into recovery, execution is going to be a big part of what I think can help your team be successful. And when I think about execution and great execution, it's what I think of as a force multiplier. A force multiplier is a tool or a technique or a system that we can use that when we apply the same amount of effort, we get an exponential result. So think about this as pounding a hammer into wood with your hand, or sorry, pounding a nail into wood with your hand versus a hammer. Okay, we can eventually, with your hand, you could probably get a nail. Be very painful, but you probably get the nail in the wood versus using a tool like a hammer. The amount of the force multiplication of being able to apply that same tool with as much or even less effort is amplified. And so when we can apply great tools, great execution tools, they are force multipliers for us. Another example, you can cut down trees with a handsaw, right? It could take a large tree, it could take some time, but you can do it. But when we apply a tool like a chainsaw to being able to cut down trees, the force is multiplied. And so what I want to hopefully encourage you with today is I want to give you tools that for you and your leadership team you can use that are going to multiply your force. So this is to say that we want to make your meetings better. We want to make them more efficient. You know, for a lot of our organizations, the time that we spend in meetings, even now, even virtually, are one of the most expensive things that we do. And so we want to make sure that those time that when we're in meetings and when we're focusing our time, capital, resources in our business, that is focused on the right thing. And execution is what wins the day in that respect, in my opinion. It helps multiply our force. And so what I'd like to do is look at 3 key ingredients today. So we're going to cover these 3 in order around what makes up great execution, in my opinion. And I think the first is clarity. Clarity is just our ability to articulate where we're going. It's being very clear on what the end in mind is, as Covey said, and being able to spell that out. And again, even in chaotic environments, we need to maybe take a step back and think about how we need to adjust based on where we want to head. The second is alignment. And once we're clear on where we want to get going and where we're headed, we've got to get aligned as a team and get 100% on the same page. And so oftentimes, you know, what I've seen in my own businesses and what I see with other businesses when I have an opportunity to work with them is that oftentimes, if we are clear, there's not full alignment with the leadership team, and beyond that, with the whole organization on where we're headed. So now more than ever, it's so important that the whole company understands what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get there. And so I want to give you some tools to be able to do that. And then lastly, focus. And focus is it's the disciplined use of time and resources. And so time and resources are finite. And so the way in which we employ them, the way in which we use them, I think about this picture of this laser cutter. I spent 15 years in manufacturing, and I was in the manufacturing industry, and I was around the laser cutting equipment a lot. You know, it always blew me away that a laser was able to take light and focus it in a high-powered way to be able to cut through an inch of carbon steel, and in a very accurate and effective and efficient way. And so what we're trying to do in our organizations as leaders is there's 100 different things we could do and focus our time and energy on. We're trying to focus our team's time, energy, resources, and so on in some very specific areas so that we can get the best result. And so again, we'll cover a few tools to be able to do that. Okay, so let's start with the first ingredient, clarity. So clarity, what I would suggest there is, again, come back first and foremost, set a time to look at your 2020 operating plan if you have it, or your vision. It's very tempting right now. You know, we're almost 5 months, we're beginning our 5th month into the year, and it can be very tempting to just throw the whole thing out. You know, as you think about that question that Carol asked in the beginning, 1 to 10, how much is your plan changed now at this point in the year? I would encourage you, don't throw that out. There's been tremendous thinking and effort that you and your team have probably spent putting that together. That's a great starting place. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to get all of that done now, given what we're facing, but I would start there. That's a great foundational conversation point. What I would do is then look at it and discuss and disposition every strategy, goal, and objective. And if you didn't put one of those together for this year, getting the team together to just have a clean slate around what should we focus on, what are the right strategies, goals, and objectives for us to focus on as we move forward, and obsess about the most important things, because you can't do it all. My guess is if your businesses are anything like mine, we have more finite resources and more finite time to accomplish some of these things than we did just a couple months ago. And so getting really focused, really clear about what's most important is going to be really helpful for you. And so here's a super simple tool that I've used that I find that really helps in this respect. Go through and disposition your plan. So if you're looking at all those strategies, goals, and objectives that you had, or things that you have now that you want to get done, go through and identify, are there some things on there that just need to be stopped or paused? First and foremost, we can't do everything. So what should be stopped and paused? And then what can be finished, continued, or even started or grown based on where things are at. So a super simple Excel sheet or a table that you can list all of those strategies and initiatives, and you start to, as a team, discuss them and disposition them. So in terms of the start, let's start about the start and the pause first. So just think about those things that they seem like great ideas in December or January, but man, now based on what we're facing, we either don't have the financial resources to be able to pull that off, we don't have the time, we've had to pivot, we've had to adjust, there's just so much that has changed. I would encourage you to not throw those away, but to just put them in a parking lot, put them somewhere for later, because those could be very applicable. They're just not for now issues. And so you can see examples of that. Maybe you were going to implement a new CRM, and you don't have the time, the financial resources to do that. Maybe the customer base is diminished and we no longer need to do that. So you decide to use your current system indefinitely. Maybe you were going to make some strategic hires or acquisitions or open a sales office. Again, those could be very valid for the future, just not for now. So if you put those in the parking lot and then you have a cadence, because we will get through this and things are going to, start to adjust and get and ramp up again. And as they do, your team can have a cadence to go back to your parking lot and look at some of those ideas and strategies and objectives that just are not for now. They're for later. Then go through and look at your finish, your continues, and your grows, or even the things that you want to start, and start to, first off, look at the ones that are very close to finishing. So I'll go back to football season. The teams that win consistently are the teams that not only get in the red zone, but score in the red zone, right? When they're able to, not just go 95, 80 yards or 95 yards down the field, but when they get to the 5-yard line, they get it across the goal line. They score. And so if we have we have initiatives that we're very close to getting done, and we just need to push it through and complete it. Again, execution is about the discipline of getting these things done. Add those to a to-do list and start to track them. Things that maybe they're just a couple weeks away from being able to complete them, and we put all this investment, time, and energy into it. Let's get those done. So assigning an owner, putting it on a to-do list that's visible for your team, and we'll talk a little bit more about that to-do list here a little bit later this morning. Then look at everything and identify, for the finish, continue, and grow, which ones are the most important for your team. So prioritize them. Let's call those rocks. They're the biggest. They're these boulders that, among everything else, should take the priority of our time, attention, resources. We'll identify 3 to 7 of those for the next 90 days, not for the year. Bring the window in, and let's just think about the next 12 weeks. And as a team, agree on what your company rocks are going to be. What are the 3 to 7 that are most important, that should get the majority of your best time and attention, and assign an owner to each. Make sure that there's one person that's accountable for that, and make them SMART. So that's that acronym of specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So we want these to be super clear. We want to understand where the finish line is and exactly what it looks like for each one of those rocks. As you do that, you may find that there's one goal that thematically rises above all of them. So is there a single all-important initiative or goal? So when I think about that health and wellness business that I co-own, one of the things right now that's most important for us, we're continuing to operate. We were able to pivot and work in a virtual environment. So our personal trainers and our therapists have been working virtually for the last 3 or 4 weeks with clients. And one of the things and we were fortunate, probably like many of you, to go ahead and get some PPP funding. And so we've got this finite period of time. We got 7 or 8 weeks with our full staff where we need to get to a place where we are where we are sustainable. And our team knows that. And so one of the things that we're talking about is, hey team, we need everybody's help. This is going to involve everyone to get across this short-term finish line. We're going to prioritize everything that we do over the next 7 or 8 weeks to make sure that when we get to that point, we have to be in a healthy financial position and a sustainable financial position for our company to thrive for the next 90 days or so on. And so we have a rallying cry as a team that everybody's a part of, making sure that we get to that all important goal over the next 7 or 8 weeks. All right, let's look at the second ingredient. So that was clarity. We're going to look at alignment. So once we're clear on where we're headed and we've started to lock into that, we've got to get everybody on the same page. And so one of the ways I would recommend doing that is first getting clear on the roles and responsibilities in the short term for everybody in the organization, because that could look a lot different for you right now. I think about, again, I'll just continue to pull from that one business. So our trainers, for example, their focus was to really just give our clients a great experience and be able to do the personal training and deliver that. Now they're delivering in a virtual environment, but part of their roles that have changed is they're starting to have to do more sales than what they typically would have done. So in the past, the business did a lot of that sales and marketing for them. Now the emphasis for them is in their new role. They're taking on a new role or new responsibility, which is not only deliver a great personal training experience to that client, but also use that as a way to relationally, hopefully sell them and bring on more clientele through that process. And so that's a new responsibility, selling, that we're having to get really clear on for them in the short term. And so we've had to communicate the new structure. Again, in that business, we have a whole front desk staff that is no longer in the office. So how do we keep that front desk staff, that admin team, productive? Their roles are changing. The focus of what they're working on over the next 7 to 8 weeks is different than what it typically would be. And so then giving that team, giving each of your team members a way to measure their results daily or weekly. So how do they know if they're winning? How do they know if they're doing the right thing? And so ideally with alignment, once we're clear on roles and responsibilities, we actually want to get to a place where organizationally we understand where we are, but then also everyone in the business has at least one number daily or weekly that's telling them if they're winning. Are they doing the right things? Are they focusing in the right areas? All right, so as you think about roles and responsibilities, the tool that I would suggest is this accountability chart. The accountability chart is essentially an org chart on steroids. And what we're doing with the accountability chart is we're just getting really clear on starting with roles and responsibilities, and then working to get the right people in the right seats. Jim Collins and Good to Great really highlighted that idea of getting the right people in the right seats across the entire organization, or as he said, the right people in the right seats on the bus. What I would suggest with the accountability chart, though, in terms of your exercise, is narrowing the focus to 1 to 3 months, because the roles, even for leaders, even for each of us, the roles that we have in our business, the things that we're focused on, the responsibilities could look different for now than what they would look like in the future and what we thought they might have looked like when we put our plan together in January. And so starting almost clean slate, building an accountability chart with who's going to do what build the seats first, then understand what people are going to go into those seats. And the way we do that is to GWC each role assignment. So again, the structure first. What's the structure that's needed for the next 90 days? Start with functions, not titles. So we're not looking for CEO, VP of sales, COO, so on and so forth. What we're looking for is who's going to lead sales? What's the sales function, the sales functional leader? Who's going to be leading operations? Who's going to be ultimately accountable for operations? Ultimately accountable for finance? The major functional responsibilities, and then the 3 to 5 major roles underneath each one of those. As you do that, though, what I would encourage you to do as a team is to GWC, and GWC stands for Gets It, Wants It, Capacity. GWC your team and each of you on your strengths and your unique abilities. So again, when we're thinking about we're just thinking about this in a 90-day window. You're thinking about your accountability chart in 90 days. You're thinking about where we're trying to head, because we already started to get clear on what we want to accomplish. Now we need to think about where do we put people to help us get there. It may very well be that maybe you're a leader in your business and you're going to need to spend way more time in sales. Now, maybe you haven't done sales in your business for 5 years. You put somebody else in that role, but because of what's important right now to get your business another 90 days out, maybe you need to drop down back into sales and lead sales for a season to be able to help your team get to where they need to go and generate and build those relationships back into the business, generate a pipeline, and so on and so forth. So the roles, even for us as leaders, could look different for 90 days than what they have historically looked like traditionally, in terms of the things that we were focused on and what they might look like in the future. And so again, if you're great at sales, then maybe that's an area where you need to spend time, or maybe you're great operationally, and having you spend more time over the next 90 days operationally in the business could bear a lot of fruit. So again, going back to strengths and unique ability, and then ask 3 important questions. So the G is, the person that we're going to put into that seat or in that function, do they truly understand their job role? Like, do they understand the ins and outs of what we're going to ask them to do? And again, just to emphasize, this could be different. Maybe they traditionally, on the org chart, they have filled this role, but in the next 90 days, to get where we need to go in recovery, they're going to need to do something different. So we need to ask ourselves, are they going to be able to do that? Can they do that effectively? Are they a cultural fit? Are they in line with our values and our vision? So again, just an example, pulling from that health and wellness business, one of our values there is adaptability. And this has been an opportunity for us, man. If we've got to be adaptable in any time, this is the time where we've got to be adaptable. And so we've called on that to our team, and we've assessed our team, because if we have people on our team that can't adapt, they can't adapt to new roles, they can't adapt to working in different ways, so on and so forth, they're probably not going to get it in a way that we need them to get it to be a part of where we're headed. Go the want it is the W, and want it is that person interested? Do they have the passion? Do they have the desire to go to do what we're asking them to do and to help us get where we're wanting to get to? And again, core values is a piece of that, but we want to see that drive. And again, going back to wherever you need to get 90 days from now. Again, if your business is anything like mine and many of my clients, it's going to take a lot of hard work to be able to get there. This is not, if people are working from home, this is not an excuse for them to dial back. If anything, we need to dial up, but we need to have very clear clarity, alignment, and focus to be able to do that. So we're looking to say, is everybody that's engaged in our business, do they have the drive? Do they want it? And are they exhibiting the passion to help us get to where we need to get to? And then lastly, the C is capacity. And that's just saying, like, do they have the time? Do they have the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual capabilities? They have all the stuff, the raw stuff, to be able to help us get to where we need to get to, and to be able to be successful in the role that we're asking them to do. One of the things that we might find in this is that as you look at your accountability chart, you may have certain roles and responsibilities that are and certain individuals that we're going to ask them to do way more than they have the capacity to do. They're going to need to have super broad shoulders, and they're going to need to do so much to be able to help your team get to where you're trying to get to. You may have others that have more capacity. So part of what we need to do as leaders is shore those things up, because if we're overloading someone or a team and they just can't possibly do what we're asking them to do, they don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth, then as leaders, that's something that we're going to need to work through. So again, GWC, it's a great tool as you build out this accountability chart for the next 90 days in your work plan. Be honest with yourselves, both as you assess your leadership team because this starts with each of us as leaders, but then everyone else in the organization, to make sure that we're aligning in that way. Okay, a couple other things on alignment, and then we'll move to the third ingredient, focus. So this is probably goes without saying, we've got to ramp up our communication. I know many of you have done a great job at doing that here just in the last 6 to 8 weeks. We need to continue to do more of that. And what I would say is, I talk about this principle of 7X, which just basically means that usually, by the time you are feeling like, oh my goodness, I've communicated this same message over and over again, you get to 5, 6, 7 times different ways. That is when your team is hearing it for the first time. And I say that because there is so much. We live in such a noisy environment already, where there's so much coming at us. It is even worse now. Your team is just being inundated with all kinds of messages. And so we've got to, if something's important, we got to commit to over communicating it multiple times and doing it in a simple way, though. So it's not about communicating 1,000 things. What are the key messages for you as a leader and your leadership team that you want to come back to time and time again? This is a phenomenal opportunity. I think Carol and Mike Sibyl did a great a webinar just a few weeks ago and talked a lot about core values. This is a wonderful opportunity to come back to core values and to emphasize those to your team and to talk about our core values. This is how we know if our core values are real or not. If they're part of our DNA, this is an opportunity to live into them. And so simplifying our messages, wrapping those messages around core values is a great way to do that. And that it's consistent coming from all leaders. They're hearing the same thing from multiple leaders, and it's not the bullhorn, it's reciprocal. It's that we're not only sending the message, but we're receiving it, we're getting feedback from our team. All right, the last tool on alignment that I want to hit you with is just the scorecard. And the scorecard is a simple but super powerful tool, and you could call this a dashboard. Maybe this is your KPIs, but what these really are this is 5 to 15 numbers that are going to give you the heartbeat of what is going on in your company week to week, or even day to day right now. Sometimes you might need to dial this up, and I know that many of us are looking at the cash balance and financial numbers much more frequently. Our accounts receivable, accounts payable numbers, and things like that. We're looking at those a lot more often than maybe what we typically would. So some of these maybe are things that we're looking at on a daily basis, but at a minimum, I would say having a scorecard of the 5 to 15 critical numbers that give us a picture of the health of the business, looking at those every week with very specific goals and targets on what we're actually looking to accomplish. So, and a lot of these, if you had these and you had goals and targets for some of your measurables, they're completely out the window now, right? Because things have changed so dramatically. So one of the things I would encourage you to do, and you can see it in the orange box there, is maybe we need to adjust our goals and targets for the new normal. It can be really challenging week in and week out to come and look at your company scorecard and see that there's no way we're ever going to hit these goals. So maybe coming back to those and saying, okay, what's our adjusted goal and target for the new normal? What's our target for this week? How do we win this week? How do we win today? What's our adjusted goal and target for the next 90 days? So talking about that as a leadership team, assigning owners for each one of those goals. So again, this is all about accountability. Where does the buck stop for each one of those measures? Who really owns it? Not who's reporting on it, but who actually owns the outcome. And really what we're looking to do with the scorecard is not just report on it, but if you're coming together every week, which I'm going to give you a tool here to do that here in just a minute when we talk about focus, but if you're coming together every week to look at your scorecard, then what you're really doing is surfacing issues as a team, because undoubtedly some of those numbers we're going to be on track, and some of those numbers and measures are going to be off track versus our goals. And so what we're going to do then as a team is we're going to surface issues, and we're going to talk about those ones where we are off track, and that's where we camp out. That's where we focus our time and energy as a leadership team. Okay, so that's our last ingredient for today in terms of what's going to help us execute better. So we talked about clarity first. We talked about alignment. So we understand with clarity where are we trying to head. We're aligning our effort and we're aligning across the business in terms of where we're spending our time and energy. And then focus, the third ingredient, is, I would say, speeding up the tempo of our decision making, especially now, because so much is changing day in and day out, week in and week out, and then identifying what is on track and off track against where we're trying to get to. And we do that by primarily by surfacing and resolving issues. So in terms of focus, by far and away, I think that the strongest tool towards execution in this area is coming up with a set meeting cadence. And I'm sure you and your business probably have some type of a meeting cadence where maybe it's once a week, there's a leadership or management or an operations team meeting. You can call it executive team meeting. You can call it all kinds of different things. The challenge isn't to have a meeting. The challenge is to have a meeting that's effective and efficient. And most meetings that I've been a part of over the course of the last 20 and 25 years in business are not effective and efficient. And so here, I'm going to give you some very tangible, practical, tactical ways that you can take the time that you're spending as leaders in your business and make them more effective. So one, set up a cadence that is repeatable. So it's the same day the meeting happens, the same time, you follow the same agenda. It starts on time and it ends on time, and being really holding those things sacred, having people show up at the meeting on time. And again, you might need to meet more often than weekly. I'm going to suggest weekly at a minimum. But with this current environment, you might have a every other day meeting. But I would follow the same framework that we're going to spell out here, irregardless of how often you're meeting. I would prescribe weekly at a minimum. So we're going to call this the level 10 meeting. All right, this is another tool that we're going to pull from EOS and Traction. So the components of the level 10 meeting, and we call it level 10 because the idea of a level 10 is that we want this to be the highest, most effective and efficient use of your team's time. This is when you're getting, if you're a small business or a business that has maybe, let's say you have 5 people on your leadership team, chances are those individuals are some of the most highly compensated people in your business. They're also probably the highest, maybe the highest performing. Their potential of what they could do, and when they focus their time and energy, they're probably spread about as thin as anybody in the business. And so when we're pulling that leadership team of 5 or 6 people together week in and week out in our business, and that's an expensive meeting, because when they're in that meeting, when we're in that meeting together for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever it is, we're saying no to all the other things that we could be doing to say yes to the things that we're focused on in that meeting. And so what we want to do is we want to get you guys to a point where you're rating that meeting week in and week out at a 10. And literally what you would be doing in a level 10 meeting is at the end of that meeting, you go around and you ask everybody to rate that meeting on a scale of 1 to 10. How do they feel like the team did? Was it a highly effective and efficient use of your time? And we want to get you to a point where we're rating those out much higher. And so here's the components. If you were to follow kind of a pure agenda, here's what I would prescribe to you, these core components. One, you start with your scorecard. And that scorecard that we just talked about, those 5 to 15 measurables, the key measurables, you start with those, you look at them that week against your goals and your targets, and you just determine, are we on track or off track? So not a lot of discussion. If we're off track on some of those measures, you're not going to talk about it at that point. If you're off track and the team needs to talk about it, you drop it down to later in the meeting to the issue solving time. So you're gonna make a note of it. Somebody's gonna need to kind of be, who's ever the most organized probably on your leadership team, maybe the person that is most sensitive to time and such, and like in the Myers-Briggs sense, the person who's probably the highest J on your team, most structured, they're going to be really great at that and capturing those actions. Okay, we need to start to talk about this issue. They're going to drop it down and make a note of it so you can talk about it later in the meeting if we're off track on the scorecard. So we're going down through on track, off track. Then we go to the rock review. Okay, and the rock review, again, 5 minutes. We talked about 3 to 7 company rocks with owners, and all we're doing is we're saying, are we on track or off track against those most important items? So if we have a rallying cry or that thematic goal that we talked about, that all important thing, now every week you're hitting that. Are we on track or off track against that goal? And if we're off track, we're on track or off track against that rock, then we drop it down. We talk about it later in the meeting. You're going to hit headlines next. Again, 5 minutes. And all we're talking about here are, again, this is getting our whole leadership team focused and aligned. Are there any big issues with employees or customers that we all need to know about? And so this is a kind of open forum for anyone to be able to bring issues or at least announcements. Maybe these are just more announcements. Hey, we got this feedback from this customer, and it's something that is really important for maybe everybody to know. So just quick 5-minute headlines, kind of popcorn around the meeting. And then you spend 5 minutes talking about your to-do list. So early in the presentation today, talked about these things that are, we're at the 5-yard line. We just need to get it done. It's a 1 to 2 week thing, and it can be complete, but it needs an owner and it needs to be documented. This is the place where you review it. So you've got this laundry list of all your to-dos. Sometimes in your meeting, you're going to come up with new to-dos and you're going to add those to the list. And they're always going to have an owner, and you're going to come back to it week in and week out, and you're going to look at your to-do list. But again, 5 minutes. Is it complete? Yes or no? If there's a story and we need to talk about it, we move it to issue solving, and you can see 60 minutes. So this is about a 90-minute meeting weekly, and the vast majority of your time, the highest impact time for your leaders is going to be taking 60 minutes and solving issues. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to, again, build the list. What are all the problems, issues, opportunities, things that we could be spending our time and energy on? And as you build that list, you're gonna add to it in the meeting. So maybe there's things that are coming up. We're off track on some of these things. We're going to add them. Maybe somebody brings something to the meeting on your leadership team that they want to talk about. We add them all on there. And then you don't start at the top. That's a very important thing, okay? The issue at the top may very well not be our most important thing. So the issue at the top, it may get talked about if the team agrees it's the highest and best use of our time. And so what I would say is list all your issues, then as a team, look at the list and identify your top 1, 2, and 3 that you want to focus on for that day. What's the most impactful? What does the team feel like? Where do they want to spend their time? Okay. And if you get through 2 of those, fine. You worked on and solved the most important issues for that day. If you get through 5, so if you get through the first 3, then you go and you pick 2 or 3 more. And so the idea is that we're constantly surfacing and prioritizing issues, and there's plenty of them now, as we know, as we're working kind of in the new normal and as we're positioning ourselves for recovery. So that's the level 10 meeting. You literally follow that agenda week in and week out. Somebody would facilitate that within your team. Somebody would volunteer to be time bounded and keep the team moving. And then at the end of the level 10 meeting, you literally go around very quickly and say, how do we rate this out 1 to 10? And what I would recommend is for anybody that gives it a lower rating, you ask them, why is that? Why do we get a lower rating? And get that feedback, all in the spirit of continuous improvement. All right, so that's it. I know I hit you with a lot of content. Hopefully I saw some questions kind of popping along, and so I see Lisa coming on and Carol. So I think what we're gonna do is hopefully answer some of your questions.
Yeah, we're gonna segue into the Q&A for now, and I just want to echo for the Gehring Center, our experience with the level 10 meeting. When we started off, we barely cracked a 9, but now that we're about 6 months into our weekly meetings, we have 10s routinely pop up. So once you get the flow, I can testify to its effectiveness of the meeting structure. So John, we have a couple of questions that popped up. Jim Collins was first out of the gate with a question, and it was his question is around, how do you create alignment, especially when everybody's scrambling right now? You went on to address this after he posed the question, but I'm wondering if we can come back and talk a little bit more about communication. You did dive into it some. What are some effective tactics for enabling your message to get down and penetrate with that 7-time force that you referenced.
Yeah, man, that's really great, Lisa. And thanks, Jim, for that question. You know, and I'll try to provide practical examples. You know, again, I'll pull from the Beyond Exercise, the health and wellness business. Well, one of the things that we're finding right now is, you know, we don't have all the answers. I mean, these are unprecedented times, and as leaders, I think it's okay to be vulnerable and to say we don't know all the answers, and so we're going to try to solicit input and participation from the team. So I think as leaders, you know, one of the things that you can do from an alignment and communication standpoint is in different ways pull your team in. We've been using you know, Zoom and so on, you know, a lot of calls with all team meetings to be able to, one, communicate, here's what we know right now. You know, because even if some of the news isn't great, I think generally speaking, people appreciate being told at least what you know than guessing. So here's what we know. You know, for example, we thought we were going to be able to open up our gym May 4th. We were starting to work towards that. Now all of a sudden we're weeks away. So we got together, we brought the team together in a meeting, we told them where we were, and then we talked about it and we got their input. We said, okay, guys, here's where we are. What ideas do you have on helping us still get to where we're trying to get to, which, you know, for us is being healthy and sustainable 8 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So involving, I think that's a big piece of it.
I agree. Two-way dialogue is always critical, and getting down into the organization to surface, you know, people who are right there on the front lines. They have so much really great insight to share. But I want to build on that just a little bit. My background's in corporate communications, and what we found over the years with change management issues is that within every department, there is an influencer, right? And that person may not have a management title. They might not have any kind of leadership role at all. But they are the person that everybody goes to. And if you ask around and you dive in, you can see across your organization who really has the ability to influence change and create alignment. And you need to know who those people are and get to those people with your key messages. So that's my tidbit of advice. Carol, do you have anything to add before we move on? And incidentally, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, is what, you know, really what's going to matter and be important. And the more communication, as John pointed out, the better. I think what's worked for us in a remote work environment is that we've got our regular L10s on Mondays, you've got your ops meeting Monday morning, and then we come together as a whole team on Fridays, just for an hour, some social, some business, and that connectedness has helped with the alignment and dealing with some of the uncertainty and the chaos. It's been really powerful.
I would say it's increased our effectiveness in these strange times. It's made us more effective than normal. Moving on, I want to be mindful of time, so we end on time. Rhett Barber has a great question, and it's one that I struggled with when we started Traction, and that's getting to one number. I think that's challenging in normal times when you think about it, from everybody in your on your leadership team, that you have an expectation they have that one number they're accountable for. Right now, it's really difficult. So how do you expect or suggest people get started on identifying that one number?
Yeah, man, this is challenging. You know, I believe that, and thanks for the question, Rhett. I believe that we all inherently, we want to do the right, our team wants to do the right thing. We want to be productive. We want to win. And so what I have found to be effective there is starting, again, almost the similar answer to the last one, starting with our team, starting with the individuals that are doing the work and asking them. So, I mean, if the challenge is how do we get down to one number for every single employee in our business, to ask them, what does success look like for you? If we were to measure based on your role, based on the things you're focused on, if we were to measure success, give me 2 or 3 ways that we might be able to measure that on a daily, weekly basis, and start there. And this is very much the scorecard, and measurement in general is one that is probably going to take the longest. It's a lot of trial and error. It takes a while to kind of dial it in and get it to work, but I think it's worth the time and energy invested in it, because the ability to see the scoreboard and to see where we're at, you know, I'll switch from football to baseball, to know where we are in the 9-inning game, and to be able to see the stats and for our team to be able to understand that for themselves, I think is really, really powerful. It has a big impact. So it's just a lot of trial and error, asking your team. They may start with them because they may have some ideas.
Anything to add to that, Carol?
Yeah, I think the relevance of owning a number. So however hard we have to muscle through the discussion has to be meaningful and I think attainable. Stretch, yes, but attainable. And that people can actually see how we're going to achieve that actual metric. And without that, people struggle because it's just not relevant.
Understanding your target, right? So when we think about all the things that we could be working on right now, Steve King had a great question in the chat box. For those of the people in our audience, and I think we do have a mix of people who are traction users and non-people who are just exploring maybe for the first time, help us understand the one or two things, John, that they can do to get started, whether it's in their own business or if they're a B2B, like professional services company, how do they get their clients going on the smart one or two things?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. Good question, Steve. Appreciate that. To me, where I would try to camp out is on really getting clear on the handful of priorities in the next 90 days. So bring the planning window in, because now more than ever, it's so hard to predict. I mean, it's very hard to predict what next week is going to look like, let alone what midsummer or third or fourth quarter is going to look like. So whatever window you're comfortable with, whatever the horizon is, if you can only see 2 weeks out, then plan 2 weeks out. If you can see 90 days out, plan 90 days out. But the big thing is get focused on, you can't do everything. So what are the most important things for the organization to focus on? Those rocks, those company rocks, 3 to 7, and that rallying cry, because that can be very clarifying and unifying for everybody in the business to say, hey guys, over the next 2 weeks, this is what's most important to us. We're going to focus on these things, and then building some cadence around working on those things together as a team and being really clear on who is responsible to contribute to those things. So I think less is more. Don't try to do 100 things. Bring the planning window in. If you can only see 2 weeks out, focus 2 weeks out and get really clear on what is going to win the day for those 2 weeks.
You agree, Carol?
Absolutely. One of the things I think we find great relief when we can come to agreement and say, this thing on the issues list, we can't deal with it right now. We put it on the parking lot list, so we hold on to it. We don't forget about it. We'll come back to it at the quarterly retreat, so it doesn't slip away from us. But all of a sudden, there's like oxygen back in the room because we've acknowledged that that's just one too many things on our plate. So I think that's incredibly important. And then also having this issues list or even the to-dos list as a repository for the things that come up between meetings. It has been, for me, it's been a tremendous gift, because I would typically, somebody come talk to me, I'd put it on my shoulders, I feel responsible for holding that space, and now I'm able to say, you know what, go online, put that on the issues list, we'll talk about that on Monday. And that has made us, to Lisa's point, way more effective, way more productive, and it also filters out if that person thinks it's really an issue or not.
Yeah, right. Issues can tend to, after so many weeks, move into the parking lot, and they weren't necessarily the biggest issues of the day after all. Well, we are coming up on the 11 o'clock hour, so I think we'll probably wrap it up in terms of the question and answer. Any final thoughts?
Not from me. Certainly happy to, if you have more questions on this, I think Lisa's going to send this out as a leave behind that you can review or whatnot. She'll send you a copy. If you have specific questions on the tools or whatnot, happy to help or provide more information for you if that's helpful at some point.
Yeah, we'll put John's email address so you can contact him in the email with the recording and the slides. Carol?
Yeah, just, the cost of meetings that we talked about earlier, we appreciate how valuable your time is, and for you to join us during this hour is, a really significant sign that, some of the right messaging, right meeting, right valuable core values of what we're working on right now. So we particularly thank you for investing your time and staying with us as the Gehring Center through these interesting and unusual times that we're in right now. I think about, if we can remember what it was like to be on an airplane, Delta Airlines often will say, we know you have many choices, on who you choose to fly. And so we know you have many choices on how you spend your time right now and which webinars and which information you choose. So we're really delighted that you've chosen to spend this time with us. John, can't say enough to thank you for your time as well today, and for all that you're doing to help not just the Gehring Center and the work that we're doing, but the work you do in the community, and the focus of Worthy Endeavors on something bigger than just getting stuff done. This idea of helping order through chaos is incredibly timely, impactful, and it's a game changer for a lot of us. So thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks all. We'll be signing off. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.
Great.